Makiko Taguchi. I'm an agricultural officer at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and I'm pleased to have you all here today with us on this interesting topic of growing food in greener cities and the role of urban and peri-urban agriculture. I think a lot of people are wondering why urban agriculture, or how is that really going to help food security and nutrition. There's questions about pollution. We have a stand also at W8 if you're interested in coming to visit us later. People asking how does this little thing actually help people improve their nutrition. There's many questions, I think, surrounding urban and peri-urban agriculture. So I hope this will be a session that some of those questions can be answered, or new ideas can be shared. So before I would like to give a sort of a more of an overview framework of why urban and peri-urban agriculture in a broader sense, food through the cities. At FAO, we have been working on urban and peri-urban agriculture since about 2000, and around the same time, FAO established an initiative called Food for the Cities, which is looking at the urban food security issue, but also in a broader context of the environmental issues, the whole issue of urbanization. Why urbanization? As we all know, since 2007, the majority, or over 50% of the global population, live in urban areas, and in 2050, it's predicted to be up to close to 70% of the world population. And a lot of that growth or change is happening mainly in Africa and Asian cities. And this is a global trend. This is an issue that we all have to face. And there are specific things that should be taken in consideration, which has not so much in the urban context, in urban planning, all those things. So we've been working on looking at the context of food in the cities. So again, like I said, the context of urbanization. What does urbanization mean what happens when urban centers grow? So there are different cases that we've seen over time. We have the effects of rapid urbanization. Like I said, if urbanization is not planned, oftentimes the fertile agricultural lands in the peri-urban or the rural areas get changed into industrial areas or residential areas. The consequences of that sometimes is, it can be flooding, or it can be different water shortages, temperature changes. There's so many different effects that urbanization has in people's lives. Also, urban poverty is an increasing issue in not just developing countries, but in developed countries also. There are food deserts, pockets where people have difficulties in accessing proper food. There are more and more people that are having suffering these consequences of urbanization. So in tackling those issues of urbanization, we've been promoting this approach of city-region food systems. So part of the problems we see is that the current food system is not catering well to the population in urban or rural areas. Also, looking at the sustainability of the current system is not really there, or there's a lot of questions around the sustainability of the current system, as we all know. So how do we improve that? We're looking at the city and its region, so the city center and its surrounding peri-urban and rural areas, how that could be managed better as a sort of geographical unit to improve better the linkages between the urban space and the peri-urban and the rural space. Not just looking at the food flows, but also the environmental impacts of cutting down wood trees in the forest in the mountains, or changing water water channels, or usage. There's so many different things that affect both the rural and the urban. So looking at it as a whole is probably the best way to increase sustainability and have a better system locally. So that is also looking at the three dimensions of sustainability, not just the environmental, but also the social and the economic development. So looking at those three angles and all the things that surround the system, we need to look at. So it's not just about improving the food production. On the earlier session I attended today, there was discussion about it's not just about producing more efficiently, but it's also about access, markets, improving the whole value chain. But it's also about helping those in vulnerable situations, giving them opportunities for better access, not just to food, but also means of livelihoods. There's also the whole landscape management issue, the environmental aspect of this. They're all very important, and the challenge that I think we are facing today is in the past that the development work has always looked at these in a very sort of sectoral way and not in a sort of complete way. So what we're doing through this approach is to try and bring all those two sectors together to come up with a common solution, or understanding the relationship between all those different aspects to improve the situation. So there are different international processes that we've been involved in. These are just examples. You probably can't read it, but so in the international level, there's this Sustainable Development Goals. It's been already discussed in other sessions. Habitat 3 is another big UN conference that's coming up next year, specifically on human settlements and sustainable urban development. And at the national level, countries do have sometimes national food security, nutrition policies. We try and encourage people to revise those or look at those in a way that's more holistic, that is more connected with all those different aspects. At the local level, we've been also working, for example, with the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, which is a group of cities that are gathering together to try and to come up with a pact that they'll be presenting at the Expo Milan in October. But these are different initiatives. There's also ICLE, which is a local government organization that has been keen on things like climate change and biodiversity. So we're working with all these local actors also to try and improve those situations. So just a few of the things that we feel that it's important to improve or bring change in the food system to make it more sustainable is to have political will. Governance issues always up high in the discussions. Land use policies is a very tricky political area, but it definitely needs special attention. There's a lot of information, research that needs to be done still in this area, that we are working together with our partners and to try and tackle all the different aspects that we are still trying to understand and grasp better as a complex or dynamic system. And then we're also trying to collect all the different interesting initiatives that are happening all over the world. There are many cities, there are many countries that have interesting initiatives that they're undertaking, and that we're trying to learn from those experiences and share with others. So just in a nutshell, FAO has been working on the Food for Cities initiatives and the Growing There in the Cities, which is a specific program on urban and peri-urban horticulture, which my colleague Wilfred will be talking about very shortly. We also have a forestry department that is looking at the urban forestry program and the benefits of green infrastructure in urban planning. So all those things combined, and also with our external partners, we have created a sort of platform or a group, just a sort of voluntary group of organizations that are very interested and keen on this topic of city region food systems. So we have our website there, cityregionfoodsystems.org, where you can find out more information about what this is all about. So with that, just sort of a general framework I wanted to give you, and I'll now start introducing my fellow panelists here. Mr. Wilfried Baudouin has been, he's a horticultural expert with FAO for many, many years, and he will be sharing with you about the Growing Greener Cities program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kiko. So, we are ready. So, I know the time is short. Do you know about FAO's Save and Grow program? Paradigm? So, it's actually Save and Grow means to grow more with less. So, it's antagonistic to the past green revolution where you use a lot of inputs. So now we try to still maintain the productivity but using less inputs. So since the time constraint, I will try to say more with less time. Okay, the same concept. Now, next please. So I think in the title you have seen Growing Greener Cities through Microgardens. So I will have to clarify these two concepts and then see how they fit together. The justification for having a program in cities has already been elaborated by Makiko, but as you can see from this graph, the trend in urbanization will continue, whereas the green line shows how the rural population will remain almost stable for the next 20 to 30 years to come, around 3 billion. All the population increase that will come from now for the foreseeable future will be people that are going to live in cities. Next. So what did FAO do in the meantime? So we had many types of projects. One type of project is about proposing horticulture-based activities. Why horticulture? Because horticulture is about vegetables, fruits, roots and tubers, ornamentals, mushrooms, condiments. Because these type of crops, they can yield a lot in terms of quantity and in terms of value on small areas. And around cities, you usually have a problem with land. So we had a good number of projects all over the world, and they mainly focused on building green belts around cities in sort of allotment schemes, irrigated small-scale farmer schemes, or next, yes, or home gardens for people who have small plots around their dwellings. Next, please. Now, from the experience gained from these projects that have lasted for the last 15 years, FAO developed a guideline for mayors and also central government authorities, which we call the Growing Greener Cities concept. And it can be summarized in 5 pillars. Number one, yes, it's about securing the access to land and water. And that's really a key problem in most cities. 2. The second one is securing the quality and the safety of the produce. Because what we could learn during the implementation of this project, that the people, they use any kind of type of water to irrigate, they use a lot of pesticides. So what about the quality and the safety of the product? So we must address this issue by training the people on good agricultural practices and be sure that we preserve the environment and the quality of the produce. Next. The next pillar is about securing involvement of all the stakeholders along the value chain. So it's not a question just to how do you produce carrots, how do you produce cabbages, but how do these cabbages get into the market? And how are the stakeholders empowered? For example, people have to get organized in farmers' organizations, they need to have access to credit and so on. So take a look at also the input availability and supply. So take a look at the whole chain. Next. The number 4, maybe, which could be the number 1, one must secure the political commitment and the institutional context, because if the people is not convinced that something has to be done about the management of the urban and peri-urban horticulture, then it will be very difficult to have a sustainable and lasting impact. So we have to assure that this urban and peri-urban horticulture policy and growing green cities get into their agenda for agricultural development. The last one is about securing the marketing and enhancing the access or facilitating the access and the consumption. Now that's interesting, because that is where we came across we are missing something in our program. So we are dealing with green schemes, allotment gardens, everything where there is where the people have access to land. But most of the poor people, they are actually living in the context of a neighborhood in the city where they have no land. So they have only a balcony, a rooftop, a small patio. So there came the idea to promote a very small production unit that will fit this urban context. So you can see in Sao Paulo or in Caracas, there is no space, so you cannot propose any allotment schemes, but there is where the people live and need access to fresh produce. Next. So through the next series of projects was to develop this technology in different environments, latitudes, altitudes, longitudes. Here you have it in Bolivia at 4,000 meters of altitude. Next, here this is in tropical regions, El Salvador, Brazil, in Congo, so in tropical humid zones. Next. Something interesting, so it's not only individual micro gardens for families, but people like also to do it in a community context, so they can help each other. And you can see this concept very well accepted. Here you see it in barrios of Caracas, where you would think nobody can grow anything. Well, micro gardens can fit there. Next, please. Next. This is in the Mediterranean climate environment on the roofs of buildings in Cairo, where the people used to just put a lot of rubbish, so these are now recovered to become green roofs. Next, please. You can go from simple technologies to more sophisticated hydroponics with related costs. So FAO doesn't shy away from this simple technology. It was exposed and demonstrated on the occasion of the World Food Summit in 2002 in our headquarters in Rome. Next, please. And just recently, in October 2014, it was also exposed on the main square of Brussels on occasion of the UN Day. Now, what can you grow in micro gardens? Quite a diversity of produce, leafy vegetables, root vegetables, fruit vegetables, and in our stand in S8 you can come and recognize many of these which are listed here. Another thread is also that these micro gardens are very, very productive. You can read there the quantities you can yield per square meter in the number of days. Actually, they beat any productivity on a large scale, practically. Next. Thank you. Interesting also, they are eligible for diversification and be integrated with smaller livestock, short cycle livestock, and then you can use the manure to fertilize land. Micro gardens have something special. So maybe time is running, so I will maybe not come to the conclusion, but the conclusion you will draw it yourself. What are all the advantages of micro gardens? So the list is long. So maybe while I'm speaking, you will take notes, so you will have the conclusions already before I end. Thank you. So something very important, that you can manage to grow micro gardens without using chemicals. So we try to invent all sorts of physical barriers to trap insects and other pests and diseases insect-proof screening, sticky traps to catch aphids, to catch whitefly, to catch strips, and so on. So no pesticide. Next. So that allows to give a very high quality and safety label to this produce, and for those who want to sell the surplus, they can get added value out of it. Very importantly, these systems, they are very highly water use efficient. We say you get more crop per drop. We don't lose any drop. There are systems to recover in a bottle, and then this bottle can be used to water again. Or you will see in our stand, we can leave the drain dripping in another small garden that is cultivated in a tire from a car or a truck. Next, please. Here I just put a comparison. So normally I ask this question to the audience: how many liters of water do you use to grow 1 kilo of tomato in a conventional spade irrigation system? So you can read it from the screen. How many liters? Because I don't have the screen in front of me. So it is like 1,000 liters, 1 cubic meter to produce 1 kilo of tomato. How many do you do? So then you have intermediate technologies. Now, the more advanced technology is the microgarden. How many liters you use? 30. 30. What is the percentage? No, what is the percentage from 30 to 1,000? 3. So you use 3% of the water. So this is quite important in today's reality, where we have to save water. More crop per drop. Another very interesting thing. We don't want to remain dependable upon the use of chemical mineral fertilizers. So you can very happily recycle the urban waste, the kitchen waste, into compost and vermicompost to then have next, yes. And with the help of our friend, the earthworm, you can produce very good humus. It is rich in humic acid, which is very easily absorbed by the plants. Now, environmental benefits. You know that the photosynthesis mechanism will absorb carbon dioxide and release the oxygen we need to breathe. So these microgardens, they are air cleaners, which you have at home. And if you have a 2 square meter, it will produce enough oxygen for one adult to survive in the context of a city. Another important contribution that microgardens, as everything which is green, will help to reduce the effect of the heat island. So heat builds up above a city, and through the phenomenon of the evapotranspiration, it will cool the air. Why? Because each gram of water to be evaporated needs 293 calories, which they capture from the air. As you know, if it is too hot, you go under a tree, you feel fresh. Next please. Now, all this information and much more, you can find on our website, Microgardens, which has been recently released. So you can find it on the FAO site, or through Google you will have access to it. The next one. Also, you may wish to know what is the performance, the yields, and what do people grow in different countries. That you can find in another website, which is called Hortivar. It's FAO's database on the performance of horticulture species and cultivars worldwide. The next. Almost finished. Okay. So, microgarden is a good example of what I said in the beginning, Save and Grow, which is a new paradigm that FAO is advocating. So people should always try to produce more with less. So it's a question of the sustainable intensification and diversification. Don't go for more land, try to get the more of what you have already. Next, please. So you can get more yield, of course, with less space, with less soil, with less water, with less pesticide, with less fertilizer, with less, what is it written there? Physical effort, yes. And then with less transport, with less packaging, and with less post-harvest losses. you can get, of course, more yield per unit of water, per unit of space, per unit of time. So we were very pleased that in 2008, microgarden technology was the winner of UN-Habitat and got the prize of Dubai International for the best practice and environmental friendly practice in the city. Next. And last, I would say, but not least, why do we do all this? I think the purpose, after all, is to try and reduce malnutrition. There is still too many people, even if they are not hungry, they suffer from nutrition-linked diseases. So by providing them the possibility to grow their own vegetables at home, many people will be able to reduce the risk of nutrition-linked diseases. So instead of continuing with the supplementation of vitamins, I think in the long run, we have to people to grow their own vegetables. So we can say if everyone could grow or produce vegetables at home, everyone also could eat them. And the last one, these are nice tools to be used in schools to make the young generation familiar with the growing of vegetables and by eating them. So it is a nice support for nutrition education programs, and it is very popular now for city-to-city collaboration with what we call the decentralized cooperation program. I thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wilfred, for that. Our next speaker is Marielle Dubling, who is sitting next to me here. She's the director of the Raw Foundation, which is a resource center in urban agriculture, and she'll be sharing with us her experience of, she also has many years of experience in the area of urban agriculture. She'll be sharing us from the development trends and challenges in urban and peri-urban agriculture.
Thank you, Makiko. I have a bit of a, flu cold voice, but I still hope the message comes through. So my organization, we are an international network, working for the past 15 years on urban agriculture and food systems. And our mission is to support municipalities and regional governments to promote and develop municipal programs and policies on urban agriculture and food systems, depending on their area of interest, be it more food security, climate change, local economic development, or resource recycling of water and waste and energy. I just want to clarify that microgardens are one important aspect of urban and peri-urban agriculture. But when we talk about UPA, then we also mean practices related to livestock, small-scale intra-urban and larger-scale peri-urban, small farms, but also social enterprises, family farms, and not just open air, but also increasingly artificial light based growing systems, what is called vertical farming. And those are actually the two main development trends that we see in urban agriculture. One is towards intensification and different types of vertical farming, be it more high-tech, where you can see different images from Singapore and other Asian countries, or like the image shown from Bolivia, produce more on less land. And the second trend is towards more local and ecological production. Micro-gardens are one of them, community gardens, but we see also in Europe all the trends related to the food boxes that you can get, the direct consumer-producer relations. Consumers in Europe nowadays want to know that their food is healthy, is safe, is ecological. So the question is this a conflict or synergy between both things? And often they're largely separated working spheres. So if you go to a workshop on vertical farming, you will not find advocates for local micro gardens. Often if you go to more local ecological farms, they're very much against the high-tech vertical farms. But what we say is that actually both approaches are needed to feed the population, to feed different groups of the population. So the land sparing innovations, the intensification, have to complement the land sharing innovations, where as a community you grow food for your own family and your community. So the challenge is for cities around the world is to develop a comprehensive food policy for their city, depending on the specific political and economic context, and then choose the types of urban and peri-urban agriculture that best fit with the local context, that best fit with the possibilities and potential land availability, financial incentives, etc. So what are the development challenges actually for both systems? And I try to pick up a number of them. One is that we see a change in thinking of urban planning. We see a change in thinking of compact, dense cities to a new thinking of productive green infrastructure in a planning approach, where you have green mosaics, crossing the city but also connecting different cities and bringing food and nature closer to urban populations. A challenge is, and I think Winfrey also already mentioned that, the integration in urban planning, and then also specifically in land use codes and in building regulations. And cities are working on that. There are cities in Tanzania and the USA that have included specifically urban and peri-urban agriculture in their development plan, in their zoning plans. There are several cities, Seattle but also Montreal, that have adapted its building regulations to enable rooftop farming in the city. And there's other cities who look at retrofitting abandoned factories, like Rosario in Argentina, to make use of all those different types of urban spaces to accommodate urban farming. By doing so, we should also, of course, preserve the best soils in the city region for agriculture. A recent study by the University in California has shown that an area the size of Europe can be considered urban and peri-urban agriculture in the world. So imagine the loss of land that we're facing with urban expansion. So we have to reduce pressure on that prime agricultural land, preserving the land, preserving it from conversion to other uses, mapping its characteristics, establishing what is called, what Rosario did in Argentina, a land bank, to see what land is available where and how it can best be used for growing which types of crops and by which people. And just recently in Rosario, the peri-urban greenbelt was expanded and preserved to make sure that this traditional horticulture providing area to the city would remain available for horticulture in the near future. Not only preserve production, but also the direct producer-consumer relations, or what's called the short food chain initiatives of local producers and small and medium enterprises. What we need is providing more business advice and support to those commercial and social enterprises. And what cities can do is helping them by providing land, advice, marketing, different types of financing, helping to establish the local brand, farmer shops, farmer markets. So there's a whole range of regulations and incentives that cities can apply. Preferential procurement of regional and local produce. You see cities like Manchester organizing campaigns to increase consumer awareness of the importance of locally produced food. Cities like Malmo in Sweden that already procure 90% of their food that is served in public schools and in kitchens from local and organic sources only. So there's a challenge and an opportunity for cities to use that budget and to stimulate produce that is sourced from the region. Stimulate resource recovery and recycling. More high-tech innovation, so you reuse the methane from landfills to generate energy and heat for greenhouses or plant factories. Use of excess carbon dioxide and cooling water from industries for greenhouses and for growing. Collecting stormwater from surrounding roofs. Recovery from nutrients in urban organic wastes and urine. And very important, of course, food waste reduction and recovery. There's still a large potential to support innovation. Innovation in energy efficiency, especially for the more vertical types of farming, so LED light efficiency or double glazing, and the other I have already mentioned. And finally, and I want to stress the point that was made by the previous speaker, one of the main objectives remains to ensure that the urban poor and vulnerable have access to nutritious food. So we need to think of business models. Local food is still often, at least in Europe, targeting the middle and the high class. So how can we make sure that local food and healthy food is also reaching people who have less income to spend on food? How can we think of combinations where a plant factory, a vertical farm, produces, for example, only strawberries in seasons when local farmers do not produce strawberries? And when local farmers so complement, with your vertical farming system, complement and not compete with what is being produced by small-scale farmers in the region. And we need strong government support for social enterprises and for small-scale farmers. If you want to read more about city experiences, you can look at our website where you can download a free magazine twice a year that features experiences from many cities and organizations in different areas of work. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mariette, for that presentation. I'm glad you made it through with your voice. Thank you for pushing yourself to be here. Now we'll have hopefully some time after all the presentations for questions and some discussion. So I think I'll just keep going on with the presentations here. So keep your questions, keep your thoughts jotted down so we can go into discussions right after. So our next presenter is sitting on my right side is Paula Fernandez-Wolf. She's doing her PhD currently with the University of Louvain on the effect of urban and peri-urban agriculture and agrobiodiversity. She also has a law degree, and so she has a very interesting set of skills and background. She has worked with us last year in FAO, and without further ado, Paula, please.
Thank you, Makiko. Well, I'm going to be talking more from the academic perspective because, well, whether I like it or not, it appears that I'm an academic. But that doesn't mean boring stuff. Actually, I'm going to be giving you some of the latest literature and academic research that has appeared on the issue of biodiversity and agrobiodiversity in urban settings. One of my main points here, one of the points that I would like to make is that while UPA, urban and peri-urban agriculture, is one of the many forms that green spaces can take, it is also a form of agriculture, and as such, it is inherently social. So from that perspective, it requires different sets of governance tools. So just to give you a quick definition, agrobiodiversity is a subset of biodiversity. And because it is inherent to agroecosystems, it has this component it has this social component. So the governance tools that we will apply to UPA will differ not only due to the social factor, but also in terms of whether we want to protect biodiversity or agrobiodiversity. So I'll be talking about both kinds of studies here, but I wanted to make clear that they don't require the same efforts. we know from early 80s that green spaces are necessary for humans. That from previous yeah, second. For example, this interesting study in the early 80s by Ulrich demonstrated that having visual contact with nature has a very positive influence on the recovery of hospitalized patients. Other good positive influences we have from cardiovascular afflictions to neurological problems, they can be solved, or actually it can have a very positive influence. So UPA, urban and peri-urban agriculture, is just one of these forms, one of the forms that green spaces can take in the city. Actually, in the city of Brussels, those of you who are not from here, there are already a lot of urban agriculture going on. There are over 200 right now, so it can actually get very big. Now, urban and peri-urban urban landscapes are actually typically, they're very highly simplified. They are intensively developed ecosystems, and they have generally very low levels of biodiversity. For this reason, actually, UPA is just key. One of the main points that we often don't realize is that urban and peri-urban agriculture can have very good biodiversity and ecosystem services provisions. For example, it can not only support plant and associated biodiversity, but also increase bird, bee, and butterfly diversity. I'm going to be talking about some bees examples afterwards. Very, very interesting. It also, as the city is inherently a heat island, so it can actually provide very good air cooling effects or flood mitigation effects. In the case of urban agriculture, where there are present trees, it can also have carbon sequestration benefits. Now, countryside home gardens can contribute to the functioning and sustainability of larger agricultural ecosystems. They can provide services such as pollination or refuge for micro or macrofauna. No, I'm one first. Previous. Yeah. Allowing for gene flow between the plant populations of inside and outside of the gardens. It is often said that because when urban agriculture is separated from larger agroecosystems, this can actually have lower positive impacts on biodiversity levels. But it actually makes it all the more important to have these green spaces in cities, because otherwise, well, that's all there is. There's just great areas otherwise. As Wilfried said, also, many cases of UPA have very low levels or zero levels of chemical fertilizers, and this has very also positive impacts on the flora and the wild flora and fauna that we can see. Urban and peri-urban agriculture is also great for bees. As I said, it's one great example of very recent research on this area, on the area of pollinators. The loss of green spaces in the city actually contributes to the decrease of diversity of wild bees, and so there's also a linked disappearance of wildflowers due to the disappearance of pollinators. This very interesting example in Canada, they proved that the diversity of wild bees is actually higher in urban agriculture than it is in other areas in the cities in Montreal and Quebec. So it actually proves that green spaces in urban areas are very important for insect diversity in urban landscapes. And not only is bees are actually very important, UPA actually needs the bees and the pollinators. It's actually very much interlinked. It's not necessarily the green space that determines the species diversity richness of pollinators, but actually the abundance. So just to give you a quick definition, the species richness is the number of species that you have within an ecosystem, within the ecosystem that you study, whereas the species abundance is the number of individuals that you have within a single species. So it can actually be that with the current trend of UPA, you can have better conditions for bees, but the success of small-scale food production is depending on a sufficient population of bees. That means there could be a win-win situation depending on what kind of UPA you have. Now, because as I said, UPA, urban and peri-urban agriculture, is an inherently human activity, there are cultural and socioeconomic features. In this case, I'm going to be focusing only on agrobiodiversity, where women play a fundamental role because they're custodians of seed and knowledge, and they transmit that, as examples in the Andean region with potato, or in Italy with the tomato have shown. Also, NGOs are a key actor in this system through their educational activities. One big challenge is land access for biodiversity and agrobiodiversity conservation. For example, in Nepal, in this case study that I cite, poor households that were facing a more restricted access to land preserved less agrobiodiversity as a result. This is just logical. It proves the fact that farmers, when they don't have a secure access to land, they're just not going to invest themselves. They're not going to experiment. And as I said, agrobiodiversity is all about humans. So if you don't secure that access, then agrobiodiversity is just logically going to be lower. And a very good example of that is just trees. I mean, if it takes 5 to 10 years to grow trees, logically you're not going to invest yourself if you don't have a secure land access. So in summary, this was a very quick presentation. I just wanted to answer the first question, was can urban and peri-urban agriculture contribute to biodiversity in general and to agrobiodiversity more specifically? And the answer is yes, and it is actually already doing so. In the case of biodiversity, as all the studies that I cited actually show that there are already very big efforts towards maximizing the benefits that UPA can have in biodiversity. In the case of agrobiodiversity, as I said, because it is human managed, it exists in agroecosystems, that is a human managed ecosystem, it very much relies on the efforts of people, and in the case of UPA's urban farmers. So they must have a secure access to land, and also there should be a support to the social networks they belong to, because it is a human activity. Again, it is actually dependent on how we strengthen those social networks. And just some food for thought. I wanted to finish with some points for discussion. There are many implications to this issue. For example, the case that I said on land access, is it to all kinds of UPA? Is it the same, for example, Mariel was mentioning the examples of vertical farming. Do we grant land access to them? There is also the issue of government support. Do we support from the public authorities all kinds of UPA? Is there going to be unnecessary civil or environmental planning needed to all kinds of them? And there are other challenges, such as, is all biodiversity equal? For example, in the case of London, in the lower left picture, it's an underground activity powered by LED lights. So is it actually good for biodiversity? It can have many other benefits. As Mahel explained, there are plenty of other benefits, just biodiversity in specific may not be very big. Then there's the case of aquaponics, where you have different levels, and as well as community gardens. And it can also be that the challenge between urban landscapes, we know that they are inherently polluted. What kind of relationship do we want that to have with UPA? Can it be that maybe urban agriculture is actually good for recycling materials in the city and actually alleviate pollution? Or is pollution going to have a negative effect on UPA? And then there is a third challenge that I think is key, which is integrating the different values, which is not only having a social value, not only having an economic value, but also having a biodiversity value. And I think that the interlink of those three may give us a better picture, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very thought-provoking presentation, Paula. Time conscious here, so I'm just going to go straight to our last but not least speaker, Katrine Verbeke. Sorry, I can't pronounce your name right. She is the Deputy Director I had your title here, but I lost it anyway. She's from the city of Ghent, and she has been working as their food coordinator, and she'll be sharing the perspective from a city. Thank you.
Thank you. So I work for the city of Ghent in the environmental department, where we've launched 2 years ago a food policy. And I'll try to connect the different things that have been said from a more general perspective and try to give the case of our city. So let's move from bees and pollinators to cities and politicians, and and how they work on food at a city level. Next slide, please. Previous one. This is a context where we started from 2 years ago, and it's a context that certainly has familiarities for each of you. The focus on food, and I think seminars like these prove it, is increasing, and definitely at a governmental level, a policy level. With lots of challenges, people looking for a better connection to their food, where it comes from, increasing price volatilities worldwide, tough situations for agricultures, for farmers worldwide, just as well in countries like Belgium. Food waste being a big issue and being taken up from different perspectives. And also access to food, a very social element, poverty dimension to it. But at the same time, this is a topic that shows plenty of opportunities, and there's a lot of dynamics in the market of people and organizations, companies looking into those challenges and trying to answer them in one way or another through new businesses, new types of working together, new types of farming, and several already have been mentioned, and also lots of social initiatives related to it. Next slide, please. What we've decided at the Ghent level is to take a very holistic approach to how we tackle those food challenges, and to look at the food system, not only looking at production in and around the city, but also the distribution, the consumption, up to the waste of food. So we try to look at the different parts of our food system and see where we can make it more sustainable and make it more local. We have a very good political commitment, which gives us, I would say, the freedom to move ahead at a relatively quickly rate, which is a good thing. Next slide, please. We have launched our food policy that is built on 5 ambitions, and I will quickly walk through them, give the ambition, and try to give some concrete example of what that means on the field. The first one is shorter food supply chains. So we try to make our food system of Ghent more local. People are looking for that. It's about access to markets. It's to try to connect local consumers with local producers, bringing producers into the city through farmers markets, box schemes, etc. But also bringing the people from the city, bringing the citizens to the farm. And it's not only to buy their food, it can be on a cycling route and the weekend, it can be to play with the children, it can be through the schools visiting farms. But to build, to increase, strengthen the connection between those 2 parts of the food production system. We support startups that try to connect those better. And one big thing we've been involved in over the last year is a study on the agriculture in Ghent, because we have a quarter of our area is being used for agriculture. So it's still for a city that's relatively important, although we are a relatively small city too, so it's all relative. But where we really look at tools from a local authority perspective at preserving, and it's been mentioned before, protecting the agricultural space within the city, whether it's professional agriculture and large scale, or whether it's small scale, and whether it's just on balconies or in parks. It's at looking in the different zones that a city has at what the right approach is for us to protect it and to strengthen it. And it's different, it's not just one answer. There's a different answer when it's about the real historical center of the city. There's no space left, so it's more about education, it's about communication. When you go to the more peri-urban areas, it's of course more about real food production, and then there are all the parts in between. So we try to have a varied approach at how we look at it, and what also our urban planning department can do from a planning perspective according to the area of the city where we are. So that's one example. Okay, next slide, please. The second ambition is a quite general one, is more sustainable food production and consumption. So we don't only look at professional production, also the typical urban agriculture focus of more individual or shared community gardening. We've launched, for example, a help desk where all citizens can call, can email with their question on how to grow their vegetables, how to plant them, how to grow them, when they have issues, where they can get help. And we are in very intensive coaching for community gardens and school gardens. And schools have been mentioned before, but it's a huge success. In a city context, schools don't have a lot of space, but over 60% of primary schools in Ghent already have a a garden on their playgrounds or are starting one up, and we are coaching them because you feel there's a lot of enthusiasm to work from an educational point of view on it and to work with children. It's very interesting to connect with children from a young age on where our food comes from and how that works. But they lack expertise. They're not experts, they're not farmers, so we coach them, we train them, and we do it based on principles that make sure that afterwards the success rate is as high as possible through natural principles, like mentioned before, and borders and insects, and there are ways of building a garden so that it has more chance of survival afterwards. So that's one of the things that has been very successful over the past year. Smart use of space. There's a big demand of space, it's been mentioned before too. We also encourage people to look at it in a smart way. There is a lot of space in the city, but you have to look at it in a smart way and find it on rooftops, find it in cellars where you can grow stuff. But also look at maybe your neighbor who has a garden and doesn't like it to maintain his garden, and maybe you can use it to build your vegetable garden and give him part of your produce production. So we really try to facilitate. Of course, we look from our city perspective at where we can find plots and make them available. We try to connect offer and demand of more agricultural space, but we also invite people and encourage them to look at each other and look what is available out there in maybe a rebellious way sometimes, but to be creative. Safe production, secure quality and safety of food production in the city. We often get questions on, is it safe to produce in a city where you have more air pollution, where there's more traffic? So we give guidelines on what to take into account. If it's land that is owned by us, we will analyze it, and based on that, take the necessary measures to make sure that they can have safe food production in there. And then there's a whole consumption part, of course, because you have mainly a lot of citizens that consume in a city rather than produce. So we invest in sensitizing them on sustainable consumption. We've been since 6 years working a lot on Thursday Veggie Day. We've launched it as a concept 6 years ago and became more or less the veggie capital of the world. We've been followed by many different cities after that, but we saw in all city schools, all city catering on Thursdays is vegetarian, and it's been adopted by many restaurants and other schools and institutions or organizations. And we achieve very high rates of participation, so where you could, as a city, show the example. Today we have 1 in 3 citizens that participate at Thursday Veggie Day, so it's a very good percentage, and that's double as high as the average of Flanders. So we see that the engagement of a city, of a local authority, can help to change behavior when it comes to consumption. And then of course also in our own food procurement, school meals is a big issue, trying to make them more sustainable, more healthy. We've been working a lot on that. Next slide, please. Then the third one is a social aspect. What we've seen is that almost all initiatives that I've seen in Ghent that are related to sustainable food, urban agriculture, have a social aspect to it. And it's been very strong or very successful. We have initiatives in neighborhoods that have been focused in their goals on social cohesion for the neighborhood, but what has worked best in achieving social cohesion is the food and the food production that they've done and where they've worked together with sometimes people across generations, schools working with elderly homes, Turkish women communities coming from areas in Turkey where they're specialized in food production and bringing that knowledge to their neighborhood. So different ways of approaching it, but it's been a very successful element. So it's something that we also try to protect in new initiatives, that they make sure that they look into the social component and how to create social added value. And social employment is another focus of the social added value of food. It's a very accessible sector to put unemployed people to work, to integrate people into the labour market. So it's also a very successful one. So both of them often pop up in food-related initiatives, and we try to strengthen them further. Next one. Our fourth ambition is to reduce food waste. Today, 1/3 of the food worldwide is being wasted, which is huge. So today we produce more food than what we need to feed the world. So there's a big challenge for every one of us to be more efficient. And if we look at the Western countries, the main part of the waste is at the citizens' level, in their kitchen, their fridges, and what they throw away, what they don't eat. We've done a big festival last year, cooking, based on the Feeding 5,000 principle, cooking for 5,000 people with leftovers, but also giving them workshops, giving them input on how they can use leftovers and be more creative in their cooking. But we've also launched, and that's on the photo on the left corner, a doggy bag for Ghent, which we gave a local name, a Dutch name, Restaurantje, which we distributed freely to all restaurants in Ghent, well, those who wanted, for people to be able to take their leftovers home from the restaurants. So we try to look at where is food being wasted today and where can we use some preventive measures to decrease the waste. That's one of the examples, and it's working well. There are over 60 restaurants now in Ghent that participate, that have ordered their new bunch of boxes, and it's working well. And then one big issue where we're working on too is really the daily distribution of leftovers in the city. So we try to map all the leftovers on the market, from supermarkets, wholesale markets. And then on the other hand, all the social associations that could use them, be food banks, social restaurants, and others. And we try to link those two and see how we can connect so that we have a daily solution for the leftovers in the city. And then the last ambition is, next slide please, is the food waste. You will always have some food being wasted. You will never be able to prevent all of it. And it's then maximize its potential and its value within the food system. In a city, the challenge, we have a very good recycling percentage in Belgium, so Belgians are very good at recycling. But in a city, recycling food and vegetable waste is not always easy. To ask people to collect it separately. If people live in small apartments, don't always have space outside to stock it. So that's one thing, but it's also in creative ways again. So we have initiatives that reintroduce chickens into neighborhoods where you can adopt a chicken as a citizen. You can give your fruit and vegetable leftovers to the chicken, and in return you can have the eggs. We have reintroduced pigs in the city. Again, they eat the leftovers, and in the end the pig gets eaten too, unfortunately. But it's creating very good dynamics in neighborhoods. Again, bringing people making unusual connections between people in neighborhoods. They take care of those chickens, they take care of those pigs. It creates responsibility, and it builds a debate also on where our food comes from, and responsibility in what we eat, and being conscious about it. So it's bringing, again, not only bringing the farmer close to the people, but also bringing really our food close to the people. So again, I think there are lots of initiatives popping up, trying to integrate that different aspects of those ambitions I've mentioned. Those are the 5. And then the last slide I have is more on the overarching part. So we have established our food policy, and we have a food policy council which brings together stakeholders of the food system on a regular basis. They advise us on our strategy, they advise us on the initiatives we launch or we support. So we try to continually listen to them and work with them to evolve towards the future. We're launching an online platform, because what we see is, as a city, we are in a good place to try and have the overview of what happens in the city. We try to connect people. There's a lot of synergies to be built. We try to do a lot of matchmaking work, connecting associations, people starting up, entrepreneurs, schools, bringing schools together with each other. And we will also take that online to a big forum where people can exchange, can ask for expertise, can ask for space, can ask for material, can offer it. So I think that's where we're working at. And then, just as today, we also try to take an exchange at different levels. We're engaged in policy recommendations at a Flemish level, because some of the things we would like to have at a local level are blocked or are more issues at the Flemish level. Same goes for the European level. We're engaged in the Milan Food Policy Pact to make this statement broader across the world, and we exchange with different cities, because there's a lot to be learned. And there's final closing point from my side is that what I've experienced is that we in the West, we have a lot to learn on having local food systems because we lost a lot of it. We're in a very global system today. And if we look at countries and cities in the South, they're so much closer to connected to where their food comes from. Much more local farmers markets are still, they have never lost it. And we have lost it and we're looking back to get it back. But lots of cities in the South haven't lost it. So I think it's a very interesting topic to be exchanging on across cities, because I think for developing countries, this is they're stronger than we are in this topic today. So there's a lot to be learned from us, from them, for us. So I think those networks internationally are very positive on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thanks to all the panelists. I'm just going to stand up here, and I think there was a very good sort of variety of talks, and I hope that generated some questions and comments from your side. One of the things that I wanted to mention now is that I think food is a common denominator for all of us, policymakers to children, grandparents, nationality, culture, whatever differences we may have. Food, we're all dependent on it. So we think it's a good way to bring all the different sectors together and come up with a more sustainable plan. So with that, I would like to open the floor for comments, questions. I will bring the microphone to you. Would you like to please present yourself first and then make your comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Maki. Mohamed.Yassin UNIUD.IT. I just start from the last conclusion. You mentioned the developing countries, and you have a lot to learn from them. But at the same time, the developing countries should learn also from where you have reached, because now they are pushing for the urbanization, and they are consuming their soils and causing also this phenomenon of soil sealing. And also, if we talk also about urban planning and civil engineering and architectural pattern and landscape design, they are not taking into consideration this, where the world has reached. Now you are looking for the agriculture, you are trying to bring the agriculture into the town, while the original places for agriculture was the rural areas and continue to be. So it looks like that we need like new figures of, if the term can be correct, agritectures instead of agriculture or architectures. So from this point of view, I think your experience should be a warning for them, in order for us in developing countries, in order to have wise planning and wise designing for the towns, for the buildings. Because if we consider the buildings with the balcons we have and the roofs, and these are not designed to support heavy soil or irrigation system, because the water will be percolating and causing damage. And also we have problems of wind and sun and all that stuff. So I enjoyed all this experience, this presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Sorry. I'll go up here and then I'll go back there.
My question would be around policy making. Now, since Ghent, of course, is more evoluted than most cities around the world, having an amazing mayor. But a lot of other cities, or in a global level, you see it as a country. Many countries haven't adapted it, like as if you would have seen in Belgium. They even closed down a small cheese producer. And as TTIP is coming closer and closer, the possibility of farming at home and being able to redistribute it would become a challenge, because the distribution channel is very important, because to reduce food waste, one of the key categories is to reduce that the food reaches the ones who require it. And how, in a governmental point of view, how could this be taken forward? Because we are actually in a crisis, and we're sitting here, we're having a nice moment, but the crisis is real, that food is scarce, because it doesn't reach the places, right? And a solution like this is the solution, but if you would have heard the other conference speakers, they are into mass producing and they don't believe in small-scale farming. How can this be applied like in an urban city like Brussels or anywhere else too?
Okay, maybe we'll take one more question and then we'll go to the panel to reflect on the questions, and then we'll have hopefully a few more questions, time for a few more questions.
Thank you. Antoine Strulens from the University Center for Development Cooperation. I had two small questions. The first one, there's not only urban and rural, there's also peri-urban, and about these new food production systems. How should cities and urban regions deal with them? Because often we have villages that get incorporated into cities, and they actually lose or partially maintain their identity as producers. But how do we strengthen this? And would it be a solution to legalize slums to allow people to stay longer, like we had in Europe also the allotment gardens incorporated into the cities? Then they have right land and they can plan longer. Then my second question, recently France passed a law that new buildings should have all green roofs or solar panels or both. So I wanted to know if agriculture was included in these green roofs, because in the most roofed up gardening practices, it's like you have a normal roof and then afterwards you produce food. But wouldn't it be interesting to start with the design of new buildings, I mean, to take the urban gardening into consideration also from the start, from the conception, so you can also have the other benefits, not only the food production, but also the energy saving effects. That's it. And I don't know if it would be interesting for the UN to maybe not create a body, but to see which urban roofs are available, where to develop best practices, exchanges on these issues.
Okay, that I think we'll go back to the panelists for some reactions and answers. Catherine, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Answering a bit on your question, I think that's a big issue that we try to, I don't think we have the answer, but you have a very global food system today, and on the other hand, we try to localize it, but all our farmers are, or most of our farmers are, so heavily into this global market that you have to try and have them make the switch to those local systems, and that's a big challenge. It's not something that we will change from one day to another, and we're also just the local authority. But I think it's by proving the added value of the local market, showing the successes, having them shared amongst the farmers, that we hope to move it in the right direction. But we have those debates with the farmers associations in Belgium just as well, the importance of the global market exporting versus just a smaller scale local market. And we see beautiful examples of, for example, community-supported agriculture, that on 1 or 2 hectares have a successful business, or that only produce for local market, and that works perfectly fine, where others need 10 times or 100 times the space to have sufficient income to have a good business model. So I think the examples are starting to get there, and I hope it moves in the right direction. It's a very difficult, big challenge. Answering to the other questions, about cities dealing with the peri-urban question, I think, again, we don't have the answer, but what we're setting up in the coming months is we will start doing workshops to discuss with the villages around our city on do we need a city regional food system, do we need, and what should be in there, should it be about urban planning, should it be about economical connections, should it be about marketing, what should the scope be, what should the responsibilities be, and who should be in there. So it's something that is very really on our agenda today, and something we are looking into, and we will co-create it with the region around our city, and hopefully build something where we can work together with them, and that is a win-win for both. So it's not just the city on the one hand, I hope, and rural part on the other side. And then just responding to the last question on green roofs, it's a very good one. I asked the same question to my colleagues that are in charge of subsidizing green roofs, to at least make sure that the criteria don't exclude food production being considered as a green roof. So it's exactly something I think that is there's not a lot of food production on roofs yet, but it's starting to get there, and I think we should definitely make sure that a subsidizing system does not exclude these types of production, but just encourages them just as well. So also that is, I think, work in progress for cities.
Anybody else want to make a reaction to that before I go to the next interview?
Yeah, maybe I can say one word about the possible competition or antagonism of rural agriculture against urban agriculture, whether they are competing against each other. Actually, the question was raised by FAO to its member nations about now 15 years ago, before FAO had a formal established program on urban agriculture. So after having studied in many countries, many cities, what is the current situation of urban agriculture in the broad sense, so not including only plant production, but also small livestock, agroforestry, and things like that. So the question was, do you think FAO should continue to support urban agriculture? Is it in antagonism with rural agriculture? So are we promoting migration toward the cities? Is agriculture coming to the city? So is it a confusing concept or not? Should we avoid it or just not enable it to happen? So, say whoever does agriculture should go back to the rural areas, or third option, shall we recognize it and get the best out of it? So actually, at the end of the day, there was a consensus. No, urban and peri-urban agriculture offer a lot of opportunities, and so it will be a question to organize it, to manage, to monitor, to plan, to include it in urban planning development, try to save the better areas, the more fertile land, access to water, integrate it for the many benefits it may bring, short supply chain, saving on energy. Something maybe we didn't elaborate too much on it today is, what is the energy efficiency of producing 1 kilo of something close to the city as compared to outside, because you have to include the transport, storage, different handling. So energy is becoming a big issue in the context of the climate change. We have to avoid to produce too many greenhouse gas. So finally, there is now, the trend has reversed completely. So the people think, yes, we need to get the best out of urban and peri-urban agriculture, but in a structured way. So involving, of course, the architects in the design of the neighborhoods, new building structures, and especially planning green zone in cities. So now we feel comfortable, and FAO has therefore proposed this program on growing greener cities, which addresses several components, but it's not complete, but I mean it's a sort of ongoing working program which will be fine-tuned over the years.
Maybe we have time for a couple more questions, comments. We'll take one in the back there.
Hello, my name is Maureen Duru, and I'm from the Food Bridge, which is an organization that's based here in Brussels. And my question will go to the FAO. In terms of what we've just seen with the gardens in the cities, we know that the FAO cooperates with governments and municipalities. And in some regions like sub-Saharan Africa, sometimes you find out that the government is involved in other things. In as much as we know the benefit of projects such as this, it seems as if it doesn't deserve the attention like some of the other things that are termed as big issues. So now, is there provision for non-governmental organizations or community-based organizations that are able to, effectively bring this kind of change to their neighborhoods, to their communities? How do they now, assess the support that FAO can give, since they are not governments, agencies, and they are not municipalities? Thank you.
Okay, before answering that question, I think we'll go to one more question. Short and sweet.
Hello, I'm Nathan de Baats. I'm also from the city of Ghent, by coincidence. And I wanted to know, and I've heard from people I've worked with, and also from reading, that the big issue with urban agriculture, agriculture is the l'aspect foncier, the legal issue of the land, who it belongs to, and how do you legalize it into a city context. And I would like maybe doubling, if you could elaborate a little bit on this. So how do you solve it? What is what are the main issues of that? You need to create a separate legal framework. How do you go about it?
Okay, so I think we're having a very time limit here. Maybe a quick reaction on that from Maria.
There's many examples from cities who've solved or are solving that legal issue. What I always say is the first important thing is that you get urban agriculture recognized as a legitimate urban land use. If it's not recognized as that, it's very hard to include it in planning laws, in zoning laws. So that's the first thing, get it recognized next to housing, next to infrastructure and roads, next to water bodies and green spaces as a specific separate land use category. And then there's many legal frameworks and tools that are used to stimulate either permanent or temporary use of land. You have property tax reductions of people who have land they use for speculation will not build on in the next 5 years. For a period of 5 years they can give that to the municipality or to farmers groups and get a property tax reduction. That's done both in Europe but also in Brazil. You have temporary land use agreements that are being signed. You have cities like Amman and Rosario who made a land bank, so citizens can go to the cadastre in the city and see what land is available and what are the regulations to use that. And just as a last word, in the Milan Pact there's also cities from Global South signing that, so look on the Milan website to see if your city is there. And in the ICLI City Food Network, there's also many cities from the Global South who start to take this up as a municipal responsibility.
Thank you. On the question about how to engage with civil society, with organizations like FAO, I mean that does come up in many places. One of the things that we try and do is also, advocate and sensitize governments, national governments as well as local governments, that these could be a positive, programs that you can incorporate into your cities. So that's one side that we're working on, but we have to work from both sides, and then we still do have to work it because of all the issues that needs to be looked at a policy level. We still should engage with government, but also have civil society participate in those discussions and work together as a team. So, sorry, Paula, just a quick last word because you haven't spoken yet.
Yes, thank you. Now, I just wanted to go back to some of the previous. Okay, that's okay.
I'm sorry. Now, for those who want more information, we have some USB keys here from FAO. If you want to take one, please come and take one. Thanks. Thank you for coming.